A new Australian horror film is releasing on January the 13th, digitally across the world. And it's a film called After She Died. And it's my great pleasure to be speaking to the producer, writer, director of After She Died, Jack Dignan. Jack, welcome to Movie Metropolis.
Thank you, Peter. Good to be here.
Now, I know, Jack, you've made a number of short films, and so you've been involved in the industry for a while. How did this first feature film come about for you?
Yeah, so I've been making short films, I think, since I was, like 2 foot high, since a little tiny kid. And over the years, they just sort of got bigger and bigger. I worked at a cinema for a lot of years, and I got to meet a lot of wonderful, like-minded people who I sort of brought on board, and we started collaborating on a bunch of short films together. And it was about 2019 where, at the same time, I wrote this short film called It Feels Like Spring, which went on to play at a bunch of festivals all around the world, and it got a distribution deal internationally. It'll be available on the After She Died Blu-ray, which we'll get to later. But yeah, and so I wrote that, and I wrote this film called After She Died at the same time, hoping to get them both off the ground. It feels like spring came first, and then in 2020, I had the script for After She Died ready. I started pitching it around to just all of the connections I'd made over the years, or all of the different producers I've come across, people I hadn't met before, distributors, production companies, everyone like that, and just started getting it underway.
Well, how easy was it to get funding, to get production behind you, to be able to make the film? Because it's quite an elaborate horror film.
It is a very, very elaborate horror film. It was not easy, and we didn't quite get there, to be honest. We started pitching it in the start of 2020, just before COVID sort of shut the world down, and when it did shut the world down, people also shut their wallets down. And so we had a little bit of money that we'd raised, a little bit of money we'd put together. And so it was actually my first AD suggestion. I was just talking about it and like, what can we do moving forward? Or how should we go about this? Because he's been a mate of mine for years. He's worked on a bunch of my films with me, and we worked at a cinema together. Um, and so he was the one that was like, "What if we just start making it ourselves?" And I was like, "Oh, that's a great idea." So even though we didn't have the funds for it yet, we hadn't got what we wanted. We just started working on pre-production. We just started, storyboarding. We started getting crew together. We brought on the DOP Reese, who's wonderful, wonderful DOP. And eventually we just started making it. We were too far into stuff at that point. And so we just kept going. It was a lot of favors and IOUs and deferred payment contracts and or cheap rates and things because they just were passionate about it, and they were either people we knew or they were people who just wanted to be a part of something cool. And eventually we just kept going until we had the movie done.
Oh, excellent perseverance. I admire you for that.
Oh, thank you.
The premise of the film is quite intriguing about the death of a woman and her possibly being resurrected, and how this young woman experiences that. Tell me about the actual writing of the screenplay and so on, because that obviously is the backbone of the film. How easy was it to get the drafting done so that you had a script ready to film?
Yeah, so we there were a lot of iterations of the script. It went through a lot of different stages. The first draft, like I said, I started writing in 2019. Nobody will ever read that first draft. I think I finished it now. Normally I send it out to a few people and I'm like, here's some feedback. I finished that draft and I was like, oof, I have missed the mark on this one. So I just instantly went back and I was like, we're starting from scratch. Draft two. So draft two is the first draft I sent out to people to start reading, getting feedback on, because that was more in line with what I intended this film to be. And from there, it was just a lot of rewriting, a lot of sending it out, getting feedback, hearing what different producers and different studios rejected it for initially, using those notes and then sort of going back and revising it to make it better and try to get a yes from the next person. And then, the writing doesn't stop once you start filming. We had a shooting script that we were very happy with. We were very happy to keep going and keep shooting. But as you film, you sort of come up with new ideas. You come up with ways to do scenes in a different way. I know there was one scene in particular that we rehearsed thoroughly during our rehearsal process because we had a few weeks of rehearsals leading up to the shooting of this film. and it just wasn't working. So a couple days before we started shooting, I just rewrote it entirely from scratch, sent it out to the actors. We had not rehearsed it when we got to set. We just that was the first time going through the lines together, and it was just incredible. It was infinitely better than anything we'd written or rehearsed beforehand for that scene. And then we were also very lucky, or not lucky. Lucky is the wrong word, but unfortunately, we got shut down for COVID halfway through. We had the 2021 lockdown, which shut us down for over 100 days, um, which was a bummer. But then in that time, we took advantage of the time off and we started editing the film. So we'd shot 10 of our 18 shoot days at that point. And so me and Alex Gutierrez, the editor, we got together, we edited the first 10 days of shooting. And from there, I was like, okay, how can I elevate the stuff that we haven't shot yet to make these scenes better, to make those scenes better? And so I would rewrite some of those scenes in lockdown in the days leading up to the continuation of shooting. So the writing never stopped.
It certainly doesn't. And what a process. And yes, COVID has affected so many films. It's incredible how you've been able to manage that. Tell me about your cast, because many, I've recognized a couple, but many of your actors I didn't recognize. How did you find them, and how easy was it for you to get them to do what you wanted them to do?
Yeah, so I think like everything in this film, it was a long process. We had months and months worth of auditions. There were a couple of supporting roles from people that I'd worked with on different short films before. I've just met them and I'm familiar with them. Barbara Bingham was one of them. Laurie Durkol was another one. Dennis Richard Vonsa was another one. So those three I'd worked with or I'd known before. The rest were all people that auditioned for the movie several times. Um, it was from a variety of different places. It was reaching out to people. It was ads online. It was casting calls. We got, I wasn't sure how many people I would get applying for this. I've done short films before, and you get a reasonable interest, but you say feature film, and every actor's eyes light up. And so we end up getting hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of applications, which was amazing. But my God, that takes forever to go through. So it was a slow process. We send through an email to the people we like. They'll send us a self tape. The self tapes we like, we'll bring them in for in-person auditions. Sometimes that's two, three, four in-person auditions. Sometimes it's chemistry readings. Sometimes it's group auditions. Until eventually we whittled away and we got the cast that we got, and I'm very proud of all of their hard work. They're absolute troopers. I'm sure you'll be seeing their faces many more times in the future. They're all very, very talented.
Yes, yes, they are very good. I mean, Australian horror movies have really taken off. I think we've seen quite a few of late. And what was interesting about yours after she died, Jack, is that all of the horror was on screen. That I don't think you used any CGI effects, anything like that.
No, we had very minimal VFX. I do personally come from a visual effects background. That's what I do for a day job on these big fun Hollywood movies. So I know where to utilize it, but we just didn't have the budget really, in truth. So it was all in camera, but it's also, it's not too big a VFX movie anyway. It was never intended to be. We never tried to get the budget for that. It was always this sort of personal, I don't want to say small stakes, but it's not a massive stake movie. It's very within this family. It's within this family dynamic. Um, we do have some fun guts and gore as you've seen. But yeah, all in camera, all practical. There's a couple little VFX shots, but nothing too crazy.
Okay. It's interesting. As I was watching your film, I noticed a number of influences, and I'd be interested in your response. I saw aspects of Donnie Darko and of some doppelganger films where someone comes back and all that sort of thing. Were there any influences in particular that you had in After She Died?
It's funny you mentioned Donnie Darko. You're not the first person to say that, but that was never a film we thought about when making this film. But I'll take it as a compliment because that's a great movie. We had a bunch of influences. Yeah, I was very the genesis of this movie came after this weekend where I spent just like binge watching all of these Asian horror movies and Japanese horror movies. So one of the big major influences for me was this film called Audition from 1999. um, which is this. I don't want to spoil it because it just goes off the rails in the most terrifyingly uncomfortable way. But that was a big one. I made all of our cast and crew watch that, and I apologized before showing it to anyone. I was like, I'm going to tell you to watch this movie. I like it. It's very good. It's a very big influence on the film, but I am so sorry for making you watch this because it's not a fun, pleasant watch. So that was an influence. We were definitely inspired by or when I was writing it, I was definitely inspired by a lot of Stephen King books because I'm a big Stephen King fan. The Pet Sematary comparisons I think everybody makes, which is totally fair, it's totally valid. um Funnily, one of the other influences we had, which may not be quite as obvious, was the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Because one of my favorite behind the scenes stories from that is that Toby Hooper, the director, he shot that film to be PG. He shot it so he cut away from all the violence. A lot of it would be implied. It wouldn't be super graphic, but by doing that, they just made it so much worse. It got like banned. It was rated X. It was all that jazz. So we were very inspired by that. Me, the DOP Reese, and the editor Alex. We were like, okay, how can we show all of this graphic stuff without being super, super explicit about it? There's some gnarly stuff in the third act of our movie, and we took a similar stylistic approach to that. Not an obvious influence, but definitely one that hovered over the movie.
How interesting to hear all of that. Tell me about, you've mentioned the cinematography, and of course there's music in the film, etc. Getting that together, that must have been a process for you.
Yeah, so we had a wonderful DOP, Reese William Nicholson. He came on board pretty early into pre-production. I think we were still months and months and months out from shooting at that point. And he was just very involved with the creation of it from the ground up. He's got an incredible visual eye. He brought on a storyboard artist, so I would do all of my really, really terrible storyboards that are like little stick figures and little people that don't even look remotely human, and then I would send it off to the actual storyboard artist, and then Eleanor, would make them a million times better, and that'd be the ones we'd use on set. Um, Reese is also very lovely in lending us a bunch of sets and locations. He runs NF Studios, so we shot all of our Deadwoods exteriors and a few of our interior stuff on his locations. So he was wonderful, very collaborative. And then the music you're saying, so that was by Andrew Back, who's a wonderful, wonderful composer. Um, and from a band, John Laurie and the Welcome Strangers. So he plays in that. I've known him from my short film It Feels Like Spring that I wrote at the same time as this. So he was the composer of that. That was a musical short film. There's a big dance number in it. And I love working with him on that, and I wanted to bring him back for this.
Okay. And tell me about the editing process, because as you said, I think you said an 18-day shoot, something like that. Tell me about editing the film and deciding which scenes to use, and which takes, all of that sort of thing.
Yeah, so we had a wonderful editor, Alex Gutierrez. Him and I spent many, many days in a dark room together going through footage. He was editing it as we were shooting it. So we every day someone would go deliver him all of the footage we shot, all of the dailies, and he would go through it. He would do an assembly so that while we're on set, he can send it through, and then I can take a look at it. I can show some people to see what we're working with. Sometimes that would be, oh, cool, we may need an extra shot here, so we'll quickly do a little pickup shot as we're shooting just to fill out the edit. Um, he was very good. He was on it. He would collaborate. He would hear the notes that I'd have to say, but I'd also trust him to go do his own thing. So there's a lot of takes where he would pick it, he would go through it, he would find the best take. I've got a wonderful script supervisor on set, Rachel Ryan. She would jot down my favorite takes as we were shooting it so that Alex can put them straight into the assembly. And then from there we just expand it out. Like I said, we spent a lot of our 2021 quarantine together editing the film. And then once we wrapped, we went through and we revised those scenes with a new context, and we just spent a long time together making this movie.
Well, well done on that, getting it completed. And now
Thank
the
you.
next important part, of course, is getting the film seen. And I notice it's already been shown overseas, and you've received some acclaim at some film festivals. Talk about that.
Yeah, so we funnily enough, we hadn't finished the movie yet. I was still in post on it. And this US distributor, Good Deed Entertainment, reached out to us just asking about the movie, asking how it was coming along, if they could see a cut of it. And I was like, yeah, sure, why not? Here's an unfinished version of the movie if you want to see that. Um, they loved it, so that we kept talking throughout the remainder of post-production. I had a little bit of pickup shoots to do, and then when it was done, I sent it to them again, and then they wanted to take it on board. So they picked up the North American rights to the film. They released it last year on VOD, similar to how we're releasing it worldwide this Friday. Um, it was a success. At the same time, we also played on at a bunch of different film festivals all around the world. The most exciting one was definitely when I got to finally bring it to Australia. We had our Australian premiere last year at the A Night of Horror Film Festival. Um, where we won two awards. We won Best Australian Movie, and we won Best Australian Performance, which was for Vanessa Madrid, who plays the mother character of Florence slash Isabel. Um, but yeah, it's been great. It's been great. We've got a DVD and Blu-ray release coming up in the States next week as well. Oh, sorry, week after next as well. It'll be on some streaming services. So it's just getting out there, which is awesome. It's good to see people finding the movie, watching the movie, getting terrified by the movie.
That sounds great. So on January 13th, when it's released internationally, how will people be able to access it?
Yeah, so the film will be available on VOD. It differs a little bit from territory to territory. For the most part, universally, it'll be available on Vimeo on demand. So you'll be able to go to aftershedied.com and find out all the information about where it's playing and how to watch it. Some places will be on Amazon, some places will be elsewhere. But that is our go-to one. It was sort of a similar case to when we were trying to get funding for the movie. We got a lot of no's when we got funding, so we took what we had, we made the movie. The film's been out in a few territories, it's been out in a few countries already. But for the remaining countries, we didn't have a distributor, so we've decided to do it ourselves.
And well done on getting that done. Now,
Thank you.
just a few other things, Jack, before I leave you. You've mentioned that your day job, so to speak, is working on effects and working with big productions. Tell me about that, because I noticed your credits include Elvis, as well as Thor: Love and Thunder and Blaze, etc. Tell me about the work that you do on those films.
Yeah, so I work a lot in I've done a lot of different jobs over the years, a lot of different departments, but I for the last couple of years anyway, I've been working in visual effects. That's whether that's on set helping with the data wrangling or post-production helping with the coordination, but it's fun. I get to be involved in all of these massive Hollywood blockbusters, and you go to film school, you watch behind the scenes on Blu-rays and stuff like that. You learn as much as you can about making movies, but you don't really know how a set runs, I guess, until you've been on a set and you see it running, and you see all the little cogs working. You're like, oh, that's how you make a movie. Oh, okay, that makes sense now. And so I've been very fortunate that Australia has just had so many amazing movies these past couple of years. I mean, I'm here at the moment working on another one that I've been able to be a part of, and learn so much and get to make cool, awesome movies in my as a day job. It's great.
It is fantastic. What's the one you're working on at the moment?
Oh, I'll tell you in
Ah, you can't
2024.
say. Fair enough. Are you also planning to make another film yourself?
Yes, so there's two coming up in the pipeline because one's too easy to make, right? So um there's a film called The Rainbow Connection, which is a different it's it's the craziest thing I've ever written. And so we're in the early stages of getting funding for that. We'll be doing that. That will be fun. Hopefully either end of this year, it might bleed over into early next year. Um but because I'm impatient, in the downtime, we're also working on a different little low budget, no budget, sort of just a couple of us getting together for a couple of weeks to make a little film called Puzzle Box, which will be shot in March. So that one's pretty low key, and then Rainbow Connections, the big dog next year.
Okay, very good. So obviously things are starting to work for you, which is fantastic. I'm pleased to hear that, and your involvement with the Hollywood movies too, which is terrific. Just to conclude, then, Jack, I must ask you: have you seen any films recently, or streaming, or television, whatever, that has really impressed you?
Great question. Great question. I'm trying to think of some movies I saw recently. I mean, I saw Avatar recently. That blew me away. I mean, the from a visual effects standpoint, I was like, oh my God, this is he's game changing once again. So that's a big recommendation. Banshees of Inisherin, that was really good. I'm just trying to think of things I watched over the holidays. Puss in Boots too, that was fun. I don't know. There's always so many good movies that are all out all the time.
Okay. I just wanted to ask you, with working, for example, with a film like Elvis, and you said you worked on the some of the visual effects, what is it that you actually do on set, or whatever, to have these visual effects on screen?
Well, Elvis, actually, I was in post-production for, so I wasn't on the set
Ah,
of that one. I worked with a VFX vendor called Fin Design and Effects, but we did a lot of that's not an obvious VFX movie because that's doesn't have like big CG monsters or anything like it usually does. That was a lot of blue screen set extension replacements, but I'm probably not the best person to ask. There are some higher ups that could definitely give you a better answer than me on that one.
what about the Thor film, Love and Thunder?
I was on set for that one. So that was shot here in Sydney, and we spent about 6 months here at a Disney studio shooting that one, which was a lot of fun.
But can you describe what you were involved with? How did that work? The effects, how did that work for you?
So it's all on set. So it's a lot of making sure that they've got what they've shot what they need to do so that the visual effects artists in post have the data they need. They're able to track things, they're able to replace things, they know what they need to do when they get to post-production. So we're pretty much prepping the shoot and making sure they're shooting it correctly for the post-production team.
Uh-huh. What a fascinating process. We've been speaking to Jack Dignan, who is the producer, writer, director of After She Died, Australian horror film releasing internationally on digital platforms on January the 13th. Jack, thanks so much for talking with me.
Thank you, Peter. It was lovely to be a part of this. Thank you for having me.
Okay, all the best. Bye bye.
Bye, Peter.